June 3, 1944. 0217 hours. RAF Fighter Command Sector Station, Dover. Deep beneath the chalk cliffs, inside a cold bunker where the only light came from glowing radar screens. The rooms smelled of damp concrete and cigarette ash. Fingers drummed nervously on metal tables as operators in headphones leaned in, watching green echoes pulse across circular screens. Outside, the English Channel was black and silent, but inside this bunker, a storm was forming, on glass and phosphor. WAAF radar operator, leading aircraft woman Margaret Lewis blinked hard, her eyes raw from hours without rest. She froze. A new signal pulsed across the screen, then multiplied. 1, 10, 50, 100. Perfect lines, a wall of dots advancing like a silent armada. She lifted her headset, voice shaking. "Sir, I think we've got movement. Large surface vessels. Bearing east by southeast. Approximate 200. Flight Lieutenant Adrian Cole leaned in, his breath caught. That's impossible. Because the channel was supposed to be empty. Allied command had kept every real ship hidden in harbors, silent, preparing for the greatest amphibious invasion in history. Nothing, absolutely nothing should have been crossing that water tonight. Yet the screens told a different story. They showed an invasion. Sweat formed at Cole's temple. He reached for the phone that connected this bunker to London, to Churchill's war room, to Eisenhower's command. Every second mattered. And as the radar sweep passed again, the fleet grew. Signals bloomed, clustering, stretching miles across the digital sea. Lewis whispered, "Sir, they weren't there 60 seconds ago." Cole's hands shook just enough to betray him. The channel, a ghost, was coming alive. No engine sounds, no aircraft interception warnings, just silent green dots. Dots that felt like a threat pressing against the glass. Cole muttered, quieter than a prayer. "Have they found us first? Have the Germans launched?" But before he could finish, a second operator shouted from the far corner, "New contacts, north of the first. They're multiplying." Something unnatural was happening, something they'd never trained for. And with a slow horror creeping into every spine in the bunker, Margaret Lewis realized the truth. These ships weren't just appearing. They were being made to appear. A whisper rippled through the room. What if the screens are lying? The German war machine was always brutal, mechanical, and loud. But tonight, it felt spectral, calculated, like a trick being played by ghosts. And somewhere, across the channel, hidden in darkness, someone was pulling the strings. 20 minutes earlier, across the channel, a different kind of silence ruled. A stretch of water off Pas-de-Calais lay still beneath a moon choked by clouds. No engines churned, no steel hulls cut the waves. Instead, a chain of wooden barges, stripped of purpose, bobbed gently, tethered in place like forgotten toys. On their decks sat strange metal crates humming faintly, boxes of wires, coils, vacuum tubes glowing orange like dying embers. Thetis, the German name carved into the steel plates by engineers who believed they were rewriting the physics of war. Beside one of the barges stood Oberlieutenant Hans Richter, binoculars lifted, breath frosting the air. He wasn't looking for ships, he was waiting for echoes, waves of British radar energy striking his array. Behind him, two Kriegsmarine technicians sweated over dials, amplifiers, and jury-rigged transmitters. One hissed. Pulse received, returning signal, magnifying, now. A switch flipped, a hum deepened, and somewhere, unseen by every human eye, British radar screens began to bloom with ghosts. Richter exhaled slowly. It works. These weren't weapons, not in the traditional sense. No torpedoes, no steel. They were lies painted in radio waves, a fleet made of mathematics. German scientists had spent years studying British radar, the pride of chain home,
the unbreakable shield. And then, in the months before D-Day, they asked
What
a
if you
forbidden
could
question.
jam, not by hiding, but by creating? Not by blinding, but by making the enemy see what isn't real. Wooden hulls replaced warships. Static replaced steel. Absence replaced armies. The Thetis system didn't destroy radar, it deceived it. From Berlin, Hitler himself had demanded, if they come, they will come to Calais. He believed Calais was the knife edge where Britain would try to stab Europe. And now, Richter thought, as he watched more barges stretch across the moonlit sea, we are giving the Führer exactly what he wants to believe. He turned to his technicians, voice sharp. Amplify again. Make them think the sea itself is moving. Back in the bunker beneath Dover, Margaret Lewis felt a chill she couldn't explain. She leaned closer to her screen, whispering to herself, Why are there no aircraft with them? For every invasion fleet, bombers should have filled the sky, fighter escorts, radio activity, anything. Yet the dots, the ships, were silent, the kind of silence that felt planned. Cole finally spoke, barely above breath. Call Group Command, wake them, tell them the channel is full. But before the operator could dial, Lewis gasped. On her screen, the ghost ships stopped, frozen, a wall of dots, suddenly motionless, as if time itself had locked them in place. A fleet that appeared from nowhere, then refused to move. Something was very wrong, and everyone in that bunker knew they weren't looking at ships anymore. They were looking at a message. 0314 hours. Supreme Headquarters, Allied Expeditionary Force, Bushy Park, outside London. General Dwight D. Eisenhower stared at a table scattered with maps, weather reports, and fate. The room buzzed with tension. Staff officers murmured like bees in a hive, papers vibrating in their hands. D-Day was only days away, but the world didn't know it yet. A young signals officer rushed in, face pale. He held a slip of paper, radar contact report from Dover. Sir, large German naval movement detected, Calais sector. The words hung in the air like a curse. Every muscle in Eisenhower's jaw tightened. Calais. The one place they needed Hitler to guard. The one place they could not actually be. Because the real Allied invasion, Operation Neptune, was poised not towards Calais, but towards Normandy, 200 miles southwest. The success of the greatest amphibious assault in human history depended on one thing: Hitler believing Calais was the real threat. For months, Allied deception, Operation Fortitude, had fed the Germans elaborate lies, inflatable tanks in Kent, phantom divisions under General Patton, fake radio chatter. But now, this radar report reversed the question. What if the Germans were lying too? Eisenhower turned to Air Marshal Arthur Tedder, voice low. Are we looking at their fleet or their trick? Tedder sighed. We've never seen radar echoes like this. It could be jamming, could be real, could be both. The uncertainty was poison. Back beneath Dover, the radar bunker sank deeper into dread. Operators had alerted Fighter Command, yet no pilots scrambled, because no commander would risk waking the skies based on ghosts. Lewis stared at her screen again. The fleet, still frozen, not advancing, not dispersing, just existing, like a painting, like a mirage. She whispered, almost afraid of her own voice. Sir, if they were real, wouldn't someone see them? Cole pinched the bridge of his nose. He knew the channel. He'd grown up in a harbor town. He knew how the sea behaved. Ships drift, currents pull, wind shifts them like chess pieces. But these ships, these dots, were anchored by mathematics, not anchors. He leaned back, breath shallow. What if this wasn't the beginning of an attack, but part of a larger board? Far across the channel, Oberlieutenant Richter looked at his watch. Time. He raised a hand, signaling his crew. Phase 2.
Switches snapped, electricity crackled, the wooden barge shuddered, and on British radar, the ghost fleet began to grow. 10 miles wider, 20, 30, the fleet now large enough to rival history books. Lewis clutched her headset. "Sir, they're multiplying again." Cole's voice cracked. Dear God. The truth was becoming clear. This wasn't mischief. This wasn't noise. It was a strategy designed to keep Allied eyes and fear fixed on the wrong stretch of sand. And if the Allies hesitated even for hours, Normandy could die before it was
0402
born.
hours. The radar room had fallen into a tense rhythm. Breath, sweep, pulse, dread. Every operator now watched the ghost fleet like prisoners studying a guard's footsteps. Nobody spoke unless they had to. Even paper seemed afraid to rustle. Margaret Lewis leaned in again, her fingers hovering just above the screen, as if touching it might break the spell. The dots formed perfect geometric crescents across the channel. Too perfect. Nature didn't do lines. Warships didn't choreograph themselves into mathematical shapes. She whispered, almost to herself, "Ships don't move like drawings." Cole heard her, and something in those 6 words unlocked a door in his mind. His eyes widened. "Drawings," he muttered. Then louder, "They might be reflectors, echoes, artificial images." A third operator, Corporal Hughes, chimed in, voice trembling with a terrifying kind of hope. "So no fleet? Nothing at all?" Cole didn't answer. Not yet, because to admit that meant admitting Germany could bend reality itself. He stepped back from the screen, his voice steadied, a commander returning to himself. "Test the theory, range the anomaly. If it's real, we should get secondary echoes." Lewis adjusted knobs, her hands suddenly certain. Radar waves bounced farther, deeper. Nothing. Only one layer of ghosts. No thickness, no hulls, no wake. Her voice cracked, not with fear now, but with realization. "Sir, it's a projection, a reflection. Someone is sending these ships to us." The bunker fell silent, and in that silence, the war changed. Across the channel, Thetis's vacuum tubes glowed like tiny suns. Engineers fine-tuned frequencies, amplifying British radar pulses, bouncing them back with monstrous exaggeration. Wooden ships, empty hulls built only to hold antennas, rocked quietly in the water, puppets holding wires to create a world that didn't exist. Richter lifted his binoculars, though he could see nothing. His war was being fought through calculations and cape-wrapped wavelengths. He murmured, "If your enemy believes a shadow, you don't need the sword." Behind him, a technician laughed under his breath. "Let them fear Calais, let them guard the wrong beach. When Normandy burns, they will know what they missed." But even as he spoke, thunder cracked across the sky. Not from storms, from Allied reconnaissance aircraft. Late, too late. 3 mosquitoes streaked low above the water, searching, hunting for any sign of the impossible fleet. From below, they saw nothing but emptiness. No silhouettes, no wakes, just black water and drifting wood. And yet, radar back home still screamed of 1,000 ships. The contradiction was a blade twisting in Cole's stomach. If reconnaissance saw nothing and radar saw everything, then Britain was staring at a battlefield drawn by someone else's hand. Lewis turned her head slowly, eyes wide. "Sir, if they can make ships appear..." Cole swallowed. "What else can they make?" A question heavier than every bomb in Europe, hanging now in a bunker that suddenly felt too small. 04:48 a.m. Bushy Park, War Room. Maps lay pinned beneath trembling fingertips. Eisenhower towered over Europe. Red arrows, blue arrows, naval charts,
Every inch of the continent a chessboard of life and death. Beside him, Winston Churchill paced like a caged lion, cigar clenched tight. The air tasted of sweat and fear. The signals officer read the report aloud again, as if repetition would make it change. Enemy fleet estimated in excess of 300 vessels. Position, Pas-de-Calais. Holding formation. Churchill exhaled, smoke drifting like a ghost above his bowler-shaped silhouette. "Damn them," he muttered. "Hitler wants us staring at Calais, and it seems his ghosts are obliging." Eisenhower pressed his palms on the map, hard, as though he could hold Normandy itself steady. "We can't move the invasion. Weather barely allows the date we have." He looked up, voice cracking for the first time that night. "If we wait, our window closes, the Atlantic becomes unlandable, and thousands of men will rot on their transports before ever seeing France." Tedder stepped forward, stern. "Then the only question is, are these ships real?" A silence full of souls. Meanwhile, across the channel, Oberlieutenant Richter lit a cigarette with hands blackened from wire grease. He stood on his floating wooden coffin, proud. He felt like a general commanding a fleet no one could see. His men calibrated coils, finding the perfect rhythm, pulse for pulse, timing their false echoes to mimic heavy steel hulls surging forward. Thetis didn't simply jam. It painted illusions into the British mind.
Richter's youngest technician, barely 20, asked, "Herr Oberleutnant, do you ever wonder if they know we're lying?" Richter looked across the water, toward that unseen coastline of enemies. "No," he answered, "because men believe what they fear." Back beneath Dover, tension was thick enough to taste. Lewis pushed away her chair and stood, unable to sit any longer. She stared at the fleet of dots, still motionless, still impossible. Cole rubbed his forehead, replaying every training lesson, every radar theory, every rule that could not explain tonight. He spoke quietly, more to the air than to anyone. "Radar reads echoes, reflections. It does not see, it only interprets." Hughes whispered, "So someone is teaching it to see wrong." Cole nodded slowly, "And we're believing the lie." Lewis swallowed, realizing her hands had gone numb. "Sir, should we report that we believe the contacts are false?" Cole didn't answer, because doubt, in war, could kill more than certainty. If Dover told command the fleet was fake and it turned out real, Calais could fall, Britain could fall, history itself could snap in half. So he breathed once, deeply, and gave the order no one wanted. "We keep watching. We do not confirm. We observe." A decision that meant, for now, fear ruled. Up above the sea, the 3 Mosquito aircraft looped again and again, pilots radioing the same impossible verdict. Sector clear, no visual contact, no wakes, no ships. They flew back toward England, engines roaring, leaving behind a battlefield made of ghosts in wires. Below them, Richter smiled, because absence was his ally. Back in Bushy Park, Churchill finally stopped pacing. He looked Eisenhower in the eye and said quietly, like a man revealing the last card of a game, "Let the Germans have their phantom fleet." Tedder blinked. "Prime Minister?"
Churchill tapped Normandy with his cigar, ashes falling like tiny dead soldiers. "If Hitler sees a fleet at Calais, he will hold his panzer divisions there." His voice grew sharper. "He will chain his might to a lie." Eisenhower stared down, realization dawning like a distant sunrise. "We don't need to know if the fleet is real," he whispered.
We only need Hitler to think it is." Around him, the officers froze, breath stunned. Operation Overlord, the greatest gamble in modern history, now depended not on armies, not on bombers, but on who believed the illusion more. In Dover, Cole felt a chill crawl up his spine. He couldn't explain it, but he suddenly sensed that what was happening on his radar screen wasn't just interference, it was a conversation. One side whispering through technology, the other listening through fear. And somewhere, out there, invisible between water and sky, a battle was being fought in pure silence, a battle for perception, a battle for belief. Lewis looked at Cole. "What do we do now?" Cole stared at the screen, the ghosts, the fleet that wasn't, and he whispered, "We wait." A pause, a pulse, a green sweep crossing the radar like a slow heartbeat. And then, on the edge of the screen, something new appeared, a signal unlike the others, stronger, sharper. "Real?" Her voice trembled. "Sir, there's something else coming." And this time, it wasn't where the ghosts were.
0451 hours. The bunker's atmosphere had changed. Not merely tense now, but electric. Operators leaned forward as if gravity itself had shifted around the screens. The new signal was faint, just a single echo far south of Calais, near Normandy. Corporal Hughes frowned. "That can't be. There shouldn't be anything there." Lewis's pulse quickened. "But what if—" Cole cut her off. His voice was low, urgent. "Range it. Verify." She adjusted the gain, hands moving faster now, instinct and fear guiding her in equal measure. The faint dot sharpened, then split. 2 signals, then 4, then dozens, tiny whispers of steel where the German jamming did not reach. Cole felt his stomach drop. Normandy. They were seeing glimpses of the real thing. He turned, barking to the message runner. "Send immediate report, level 3 priority, no encryption delay." The runner sprinted, footsteps echoing like a warning bell. Lewis stared at the growing echoes, weak, incomplete, struggling to survive amid German interference. "These ones, they move like ships," she whispered. "Not perfect, not symmetrical. They drift." Cole nodded. Reality drifts. Meanwhile, aboard the wooden barge across the channel, Thetis crackled, tubes flickered, static hissed. Richter grabbed the railing as his technicians panicked. "Interference on our southern field. Foreign pulse spread, not ours." Richter's brows drew tight. "They're seeing past it. Increase output. Burn through." The generators roared. The system pushed harder, amplified radar ghosts swelling, thickening, trying to smother truth beneath illusion. But truth, however faint, was rising.
0507 hours. Bushy Park. The reply from Dover arrived, ink blotting with urgency. Tedder read it aloud, careful, slow. "Secondary contacts detected, south of jamming field. Behavior consistent with naval movement. Possible Allied fleet outbound." The room went still. Eisenhower stepped closer. His hand hovered above Normandy, not touching, as though touching might curse it. "This is it," he whispered. Churchill nodded sullenly, a monarch of words reduced to silence. Eisenhower turned to his staff. "Send word to cross-channel command. Weather window holds. Neptune proceeds as planned." The world, in that moment, hinged on one decision. Ignore the ghosts, follow the whispers, leap into the void. In Dover, Lewis exhaled with relief she didn't yet understand. She had witnessed something invisible the moment history chose one path instead of another. Cole placed a hand on her shoulder, brief, human. "You helped decide a war tonight," he said softly. "You, by seeing what wasn't loud." She swallowed, unsure whether to laugh or cry. But outside, above them, reality moved. Allied battleships were already cutting through dark waves. Transports loaded with young men stared into the cold dawn, their breath white, their fear real. None of them knew that somewhere far away, German wooden holes and vacuum tubes were fighting desperately to protect a lie. And then, like a knife of light through fog, a telephone rang. Cole answered, listening, nodding, then hanging up. He looked at Lewis, at Hughes, at every soul inside that bunker. The fleet we saw, his voice hardened, was never meant for us. He stepped back, eyes darkening. It was meant for Hitler. A beat, a realization, a shiver. Cole spoke words that would echo in memory. They weren't jamming us. They were jamming themselves. They built ghosts to keep their own army in chains. Lewis gasped softly, because in the end, Germany had pointed its greatest deception inward, a weapon made of shadows, turning on its own master. And at that exact moment, in the skies above southern England, a formation of Allied bombers roared into view, their engines speaking a language no illusion could silence. Reality is coming.